Well, it looks like we're going to start off the new month with the dreaded pest from the west bringing more rain, cold air, windy conditions, and overall gloominess to parts of northwest Europe. But don't let this deceive you because some weird and very interesting changes are going to start happening as we go through the first week or so of March. If you're wondering what kind of strange or interesting weather I'm talking about, here's a quick look. Notice these odd low pressure areas that seemingly take a U-turn right out of Russia and then appear to walk over into parts of Europe, completely going against the usual flow of weather systems. Make sure you stick around for the entire video because I'm going to be breaking everything down in the shorter range as well as what's coming up in the longer range with a new weather pattern developing. Let's begin with Chapter 1. Across northwest Europe, we've already started getting some rain and wind from these low pressure areas, but thankfully they haven't been anything impactful or out of the ordinary. The thing to take note of is starting today, February 29th, and it's going to be those blue shades showing up on the backside of this system, which indicates some colder air. That's going to shift into the British Isles and Ireland heading into March 1st, spreading cold and windy weather across the region. We may even see some snowfall in some of the higher terrain as this model suggests. Then by March 2nd and the 3rd, which would be the weekend, the low pressure area over the UK and Ireland is going to start degrading, eventually fading away. The strong cold front which crossed Iberia will continue going strong as it moves into the western Mediterranean, bringing another round of heavy rain to lower elevations and possibly some extremely heavy snow to parts of the Alps. By this point, you've probably noticed a tendency for these systems to basically stop advancing towards the east once they reach Scandinavia and Central Europe, and the same goes for Southeastern Europe. I've even gotten comments from my subscribers in places such as Romania saying how dry it is there, and this is all because of that high pressure which has been really persistent across this region for a while now, and it still doesn't look like it's going anywhere. It's actually this same high pressure area that's going to be the biggest factor in some of the changes I'm expecting later this month, so we're going to talk more about that later in this forecast. But for now, here's the precipitation outlook for the next 5 days. You can really see the effect that this anticyclone will have on Central and Eastern Europe, with many areas seeing very little, if any, rain or snow at all in this time frame. Looking towards Western and Southern Europe, on the other hand, you can quickly see how that's going to be taking the brunt of this active storm track. Now, regarding snowfall, this is what you can expect for that same period of time. The impact of above normal temperatures is still making itself quite obvious in the sense that we really aren't seeing much snow in areas that should be getting it, but there are a few exceptions. Southern Norway, the British Isles, and Ireland are going to be some areas to watch in the more northern tier of Europe. If you are looking towards the British Isles and Ireland and seeing all of those blue shades, that may be exciting for snow lovers, but I will say that I do think that this model is exaggerating the snowfall a little bit too much this time, so I wouldn't pay too much attention to any colors showing up outside of the higher terrain. Another area to take note of in Europe is going to be Iberia and the Alps. The Swiss and Italian Alps are especially impressive, where we do have some of those deep orange shades showing up there, which represents extremely heavy snowfall accumulations possibly exceeding 100 centimeters. The main culprit for this very heavy snow is partly because of the persistent moisture hanging around there in the coming days, with the more significant contributor being a strong cold front moving through by the weekend, which will be associated with that large storm system that I'm expecting to move over the British Isles and Ireland. So that was a quick update on what we have going on within the next few days, but now going back to what I said in the introduction, what do I mean by all those strange changes and odd anomalies? There's only one way to find out, so please enjoy Chapter 2. One of the things that's going to play into this odd pattern is the same high pressure I talked about earlier. This map basically just shows where the higher and lower pressures are, and if you want to keep an eye on the timing, make sure to check the top left corner of your screen. We already have some of those orange shades extending from the Atlantic into northern Europe now, which does represent higher pressure, but it's going to be breaking in half. This will basically create a more distinct Atlantic high pressure area, and then a weather wall over Eastern Europe, which will block the storms from entering the region. But this specific pattern is not going to stay around for long. The weather wall further east is going to quickly morph into a much more concentrated high pressure area over the Nordic countries. Before long, we may have a massive and very strong area of high pressure firmly grounded all across northern Europe by March 5th. Now let's rewind this a little bit so I can show you that strange anomaly that I talked about briefly in the introduction. It's not common for low pressure areas to move against the overall flow of things, but it does happen from time to time. The culprit for this is yet again that same old anticyclone, and all of the weather models agree that the clockwise flow around that anticyclone might be strong enough to pull a disturbance or two out of Russia, briefly pulling them down into Europe. It's unclear how far west they will go or if there will be more than one, but the pressing question now is, will there be any impacts from these odd low pressure areas? Taking a look back at the weather tracker map, it frankly doesn't seem like these little low pressure areas are going to be accompanied by much precipitation. It just might cause some very light precipitation or a slight drop in temperatures, but other than it just being a weird anomaly, it probably won't have much of an impact on the surface. But that's not the end of these changes, because if we go back to this map and look at what's going on by late next week, that anticyclone is here to stay. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I will admit that this trend has been pretty consistent in the models lately. If this overall weather pattern really does unfold like the current guidance suggests, we may start to see a more favorable pattern for a decrease in storminess across northern Europe, at least for some time. Let me show you what I mean by comparing the precipitation outlooks for February 29th through March 7th and then the outlook for March 7th through the 14th. I have found these graphics to be pretty accurate, especially in the shorter range, but once you get past the 2 and especially 3 week time frame, it starts turning into fantasy land. Anyways, what I want you to take away from this is the potential shift in precipitation patterns. The second graphic shows a significantly different pattern, with a noticeable decrease in precipitation across northern Europe. The reason for this is because of the potential for strong blocking up north, and this type of a pattern could direct more storms towards the south, which is why we do see a signal of wetter than normal conditions, especially around Iberia. At this time, these are just some interesting trends to watch, but like I always say, stay tuned for more details. I'll closely monitor the latest developments, especially with the interesting changes March is bringing, and when I do have some new and more refined information to share, you can be sure that I'll continue posting video forecasts and supplementary updates on the community tab. Consider subscribing if you want to see more updates, and until then, thanks for watching.